guys, it's time for the very highly anticipated eyeshadow palette declutter video that I was going to put up last year, and then life just happened and I got really busy and December was busy and here we are. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. I did want to just pop in and say hi if you are new, so you can see my face, you can see who I am, see if you like my aesthetics or not, because usually I get some new people watching these videos. So I really love colorful makeup. That's mostly what you're gonna see in my palettes. I love indie makeup, so I feel like there's gonna be a lot of palettes in this collection that maybe you haven't seen before, new brands that you can discover. I'm trying to give you some reviews on the palettes that I do have. Also, just a little heads up, like if there are palettes that you know that I've gotten recently that you don't see in the video, it's just because I filmed this video like a month ago. So just a little heads up, and yeah, without further ado, I'm not going to keep this intro very long. Hope you enjoy the video. Get a snack, get a drink. It's going to be a long one. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the declutter. We are just going to dig right in. So welcome to my table. These are all of my palettes and you are not seeing even a third of them, or you're probably seeing 10% of them. I am literally swimming in palettes right now, so this is going to be fun. I think we're just going to jump straight in. I put all of these here because they're very hard to store, and so I think I'm just going to start with these. Like I said in the intro, I don't really plan on decluttering a ton. I'm just going to declutter the palettes that I really don't think I'm going to use again. Either the brand is no longer available, or it's just not palettes that speak to me anymore. And a lot of these are, you know, newer to my collection because I do get sent a lot in PR and I do declutter quite often. So I don't know, we're just gonna dig right in. So this is the Milk Chocolate Kisses from Hershey's, from Glamlight. Wow, we're off to a great start. Anyway, here's what the palette looks like. This is a actually beautiful neutral palette. I'm gonna keep this. I do think I'm going to be decluttering some of these though, but I feel like the neutral ones are the ones that I want to keep out of the bunch, which is kind of surprising because I'm not really like that into neutrals, but I feel like the neutrals that I have in these palettes are more unique than the colorful shades that I have in the other palettes. So I actually think I'm gonna declutter all three of these. So this is the Lava Cake one. This one is pretty, but I just feel like I have all of these shades in other palettes and I don't really reach for monochromatic palettes very often. So I'm just gonna let these go, mostly just because, like I said, storage reasons. It's just really hard to store them. You can't really like put them on a shelf. They just kind of fall and they're just, I wish they were a different shape, even though I understand that they were supposed to look like Hershey's Kisses, but it's just kind of annoying. So these three are gonna go and I'm gonna keep the neutral ones. Let's just move into Kaleidos since I have them in front of me. We're gonna do more Glamlight in a little bit, but I had those kind of separated out because it was just easier for me. So these are hard because a lot of these have been discontinued, and if you haven't seen these are the first palettes that Kaleidos came out with. This one is the Astro Pink palette, which is a beautiful, beautiful color story. I really do enjoy this. I think I'm gonna keep this one. And honestly, these are quite small, so I might keep all of them because do I want to keep all of them? This one is discontinued. This one is the Futurism 4. I'm trying to open it. It's the VR Neon palette. I don't remember last time I used this palette, and now that I have my Blend Bunny palettes, which have pretty much the same sort of neon shades in it, I don't think I need this anymore. And also, because it's discontinued, there's no point in me really using this for like comparisons or anything like that. So I'm actually gonna let it go, which is weird for me. I didn't think I would, but here we are. This is the Sci-Fi Green palette, also from Kaleidos. I really like this palette, but again, when is the last time I used this? I don't remember. I don't think I've touched this in at least 2 years, so this one might go as well, just because I feel like someone else could be happier about owning this than I am. I do really like it though, and the black in here is one of the best blacks in my collection. It is the blackest black that I've ever owned, but I have a lot of blacks and I don't need this one, so I'm gonna actually let this one go as well. This is the Cyber Bronze one, and I think if anything, I want to keep this because I really like the red shimmer and the silver shimmer, and the mattes are nice as well, so I think I'm gonna keep this one. Look at me keeping all neutral palettes. What is wrong with me? I don't know what I've become, honestly. It's kind of strange. I think I'm gonna get rid of this one though. This is the Sashimi City palette. I didn't really have the best time with this. I found it to be a little kind of one-dimensional. I didn't feel like I could do a whole lot with this. And even though the quality is nice, it doesn't go as deep as I would have wanted. Like for me, when I want neutrals, I want drama, and I feel like this didn't give me that drama that I was looking for. So I'm actually going to declutter that one as well. Here we have the Cyberpunk palette, which I keep saying that every time I open it, it makes me want to use it, but then I never use it. But I also have to be realistic in that I have a very, very large eyeshadow palette collection, and I only have 2 eyes. And I also review eyeshadow palettes basically for a living. So like, I feel like I have an excuse to not use all of my palettes because I simply don't have time because of everything that comes into my collection, and I do get sent a lot of PR, which I'm very grateful for. So I simply just haven't really had the time to reach for this, and there's been other palettes that I've kind of wanted to play with before playing with this one again. So I am going to keep this one around for a bit longer because I think it's a really cool palette and I like the packaging on it. But I don't know when I'm gonna have time to use it. Just story of having too many eyeshadows, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. I have never been a minimalist. I don't care if I have a large collection. I like having a lot of clothes. I like having a lot of jewelry. I just like having options, and I don't get overwhelmed by having a big collection. So I'm totally okay with not decluttering too many things, even things that I haven't used. This one I think I am going to keep. This is the turquoise, electro turquoise one. I really do enjoy this color story. I really like the shimmer in here. The shimmers, I should say, they're both beautiful. I like the matte selection. I feel like this one offers something to my collection that maybe the other ones don't. So I'm gonna keep this around for a little bit longer. Now, when it comes to the quads, if these weren't so new to my collection, I would honestly declutter these because I don't see myself ever really using these color stories. I don't find these to be very inspiring, and I think they're kind of boring. And even though I like these colors, it's so monochromatic that I feel like I've done the look that I can do with this and now I'm bored of it. So this one is also just kind of boring, and I think the shimmer in it is a bit too dark for me to want to use this as a standalone palette. So I am going to keep these though, just because, like I said, they are quite new, and I feel like Kaleidos is probably not done with their quads yet. They may or may not be, I don't know, but I want to keep them around just in case I do come out with more quads, and I want to use these for comparisons. So those are going to stay as well. The Club Nebula palette, which is a collaboration with Kaleidos and Angelica, I'm for sure going to keep. I think this palette is gorgeous, and like I said before, I haven't used it nearly enough, but I'm gonna keep it because I think it is an amazing palette, and I love Angelica and I love Kaleidos, so it's just a match made in heaven. Here we have the, did I keep the new one that they sent me? They sent me a one with an updated packaging, but I think I gave that one away. So this is the original one. This is the Escape Pod. I'm gonna keep this one as well, even though I don't really see myself using it much. But I do like the color story, and I think the formulas in here are really, really nice. So it's going to stay around for another declutter. Who knows what will happen next time, but for now, it'll get to stay. Here are the last 2 quads from Kaleidos. These ones I'm for sure going to keep. These are some of my favorite releases from Kaleidos, and these are neutrals. So like I said before, I don't know what's happened to me, but I've been kind of into neutrals the past year, and I'm not mad at it. But I do like to kind of spruce up my neutral looks. I'm not someone who's into glam makeup per se. Like if I do use something like this, I like to pull in some neon liners or some rhinestones or just something a little bit extra fun, or a pop of color with another eyeshadow. But I think these are wonderful, and I've used this one in particular, I think it's called the Cold Brew Quad, so many times. It's probably one of my most used palettes in the last year. So these 2 are gonna get to stay as well. Let's move into some Beauty Bay palettes. I have a couple here, and I don't really know what I want to do about these. I like these, but I just don't really see myself reaching for them over other things in my collection, because I feel like at this point, I have my favorites, and so it's hard for me to kind of pull away from those. But maybe I will keep this around for a bit longer. It's a beautiful palette. This is the Wilderness palette. I don't know if this is available anymore. They brought it back a few times, but as of this moment, I can't really tell you. If you're wondering about any of these palettes, I do have codes with a lot of these brands. It will be down in my description box. I can't tell you every palette that I've gotten sent in PR, but just assume that maybe 70% of my collection is PR, probably, especially from brands that I have a ton of palettes from. Beauty Bay is not one of them though. I bought them myself. They do sell them on Beauty Bay. This is the Age of Opulence palette. This is a beautiful palette. I want to say this was their Christmas release last year, so I don't think this is available anymore. But I love the jewel tones in here, and I think that the color combinations are really pretty. So I'm going to keep this one as well, just because I like the size of these palettes as well. They're very storageable. I don't think if that is, I don't know if that is a word, but that's what I'm going to call it. This one I think I'm going to declutter. I mostly bought this because I thought the color story was really interesting, and this is the Earthy palette. And even though, I mean, look how big this is. It's so big. Just looking at it makes me overwhelmed. I don't really love big palettes, but there was something to me about like the last two rows here together with like those greens and mints that just made me very intrigued and made me want to test out that color combination. But instead what I should have done is I should have just made a video duping the vibes of this palette and doing a look with similar shades instead of buying the actual 40 something shade palette, because I've used this for a video and that's it. And I don't really see myself using it again, so I think this one is gonna go. I think it is also time for me to let go of these palettes, which is kind of surprising, I guess, because these are the Made by Mitchell palettes. I loved these when they first came out. I thought they were beautiful. This is the Head in the Clouds. Wait, is that what this one is called? Head in the Clouds. I can barely see what it says, but this color story is really, really pretty, but I have not reached for it in a very long time. It's probably been a year and a half. I considered decluttering it last year, but I didn't, so I think the time has come. I think I'm also going to declutter this one, which is the Feet on the Ground. I had the last one too, like the Milk Something Got Milk, is that what it was called? I hated the quality of that one, but these are really nice and I enjoyed them. I will say the shimmer formulas in these is nothing to write home about, but they look really good on the eyes and they wear incredibly well, and I didn't have any issues with the mattes in these two palettes. So I'm just gonna give these away to someone that I know are going to enjoy these instead. Lastly here we just have a Stray that I couldn't really find anywhere else to put, and this is the Jaclyn Hill Volume 2 palette that she did with Morphe. I really like this palette, honestly. I think the color story is nice, the quality is nice, but I think I've used it twice, maybe 3 times. So it's just gonna go. I have these colors in other palettes, and Morphe is just not really a brand that I'm a huge fan of, if I'm being honest, and I think that Morphe is just shutting down anyway, so we're gonna shut down this palette as well because I don't need this in my collection. Let's just get these out of the way because they are so big. These are my P. Louise palettes. I mean, oh my goodness. They just take up half my table already, and it's only 5 of them. It's just absurd. Like, their packaging drives me absolutely bonkers. But I love the quality so much, which makes me so mad because I keep buying the palettes and complaining about the packaging. I know some people love it and think it's like really cute and innovative, and I'm over here like, stop it. Just stop. Anyway, here's the palette that I haven't even shown on my channel, I don't think. I bought this when they had their mystery boxes earlier this year. I know I'm going out on a tangent here that's unrelated to the video, but you're here for this, I hope. Anyway, I bought the mystery box and I just put this into my order because it was a neutral palette, and this was kind of when I was getting into neutrals. I was like, let's see if this one can be the one. But this is the Wedding Wish palette, I think it's called. It's a really nice neutral palette. It's kind of boring. It doesn't really do anything for me, if I'm being completely honest. I think the mattes are nice. I wish I went a little bit deeper. But when I bought the mystery box from them, there was basically no makeup in it, and I was so surprised because I really was expecting there to be like, you know, eyeshadow bases and like brushes and stuff, and it was like freaking bath products. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Excuse my language, but like, come on, that's not what I signed up for. This is one of the palettes that came out last year. It's the Watch the Queen Conquer palette. This is the one that has a freaking chessboard in the middle that is basically unusable because it doesn't stay the way it's supposed to, but I love the shadows in here. I think they're gorgeous. This is probably my favorite side in this palette. I think it is so nice. The quality is just amazing, and this side is really pretty as well, so I'm definitely going to keep this because I do enjoy it. This one I forgot. I'm actually going to declutter this because I have better neutral palettes in my collection. Even though I like the quality, I'm just not going to use this one again. The Worldly palette. This is a palette that made me fall in love with P. Louise in the first place. I think the quality of these mattes is so good. Am I going to reach for it again though? I feel like it's come to a point where I'm not as excited about this palette as I used to be, even though the quality is fantastic now that I have my Blend Bunny palettes. How many times am I gonna compare things to Blend Bunny? Probably way too many. Don't take a shot every time I do that, but I think it's time for me to let this one go because I feel like I have all of these colors in equally good formulas elsewhere that is not in a packaging that weighs, how much does this weigh? Like 3 pounds maybe? It is a heavy, heavy, heavy palette. So I'm gonna declutter this one, sadly, but just know this has been loved very, very dearly, and I still think it's a really nice palette. These two are the newest palettes to my collection. This one I've shown in a couple of videos before. This is the Unlock Your Creativity. These are both double-sided palettes, and I think the color stories here are just wonderful. I think this is so pretty. I love that these are both all matte palettes because I love using all matte palettes together with all shimmer palettes or together with like my Cleona multi-chromes and stuff like that. Now, look at this packaging. This is why I just cannot with P. Louise. Like, it comes with a key, right? And you have to put the key inside of this thing, and then you have to unlock it, which is hard enough in itself. And then you have to kind of take the lock out, and then this one comes out, and then you have this dangling. I literally just cut it off of this one because I could not be bothered. I haven't used this palette yet. This is the one in Aligning My Future. This one was a little bit more pastel than what I was expecting. I feel like there's a lot of just same on this side and same with the other side. I'm probably just gonna save this for like the spring and summer and then maybe use it. I don't even know if I'm gonna use it. I think the colors are pretty, but I didn't expect it to be as pastel as it is. Usually P. Louise is pretty good about having, you know, more contrast in her palettes, but I think they're gonna look nice on my bookshelf, so I'm definitely going to keep them. But just keep in mind, if you get these palettes, the packaging is very, very annoying. Here I have a pile of palettes that are just like a little bit of different brands that I have a couple of palettes from, and then I have Kylove. So we're gonna start with these. I think it's time for me to let go of my BH Cosmetics palettes because these, I have not used these in such a long time. These are from the Sweet Shop collection. This is the blue one. It's the bubblegum palette. I think it's beautiful, but I just haven't used them. I also have the pistachio palette. These used to be all the rage back in the day, and these were kind of the palettes that made me realize that, you know what, BH Cosmetics is pretty good. Even though I never really bought anything after these palettes because their color stories just didn't speak to me. I do really like these palettes, but they're also quite old. So these are gonna go. I'm also going to declutter this one. This one is from Blush Tribe. I've held on to this for such a long time, but I think it's time for me to declutter it. And this is the Polina palette that she did in collaboration with Blush Tribe. Blush Tribe does no longer exist. They haven't been around for years now, it feels like, and this palette is also just quite old, so I'm gonna let this one go. I'm also going to let go of my last Juvia's Place palette. I think this is the last one I have. I used to have all of these, and then kind of slowly over the years I've decluttered them, and none of their new releases have really spoken to me except for the last one they came out that I just didn't jump on it early enough, and I feel like now it's a little too late and I don't care enough to review it. So yeah, I think I'm gonna let this one go as well. I just don't really feel like I need it anymore. So all of these are gonna go, just make a little bit more room in my collection. Let's talk about my Kylove palette. So actually, Kylove has decided that they are going to shut down their brand, which makes me very sad, but I understand it's a lot of work to run a small indie brand, and maybe the last year just wasn't as good for them as they hoped, but I had a really good time trying and reviewing the palettes from the brand. I think I'm gonna maybe keep one or two of them. I haven't decided yet. This one is gonna go though. This is the Triumph of Venus. I think this color story is okay. It's not my favorite. I find it a little weird and tricky to use, and I also don't like the box packaging. I find it to be a little just bulky and annoying. This is the Le Jardin palette, and I think I'm going to let this one go as well. I just don't really see myself using it. I don't know, and since the brand doesn't exist anymore, you know, I feel like I can't. I mean, of course I can. I can use it on camera, and I can do looks with it, and I can talk about it, but I also just hate to talk about things that people might want, but they can't get. So I'm gonna declutter that one as well. I think this one I'm gonna keep. This is the Van Gogh palette. This is probably my favorite color story out of almost all of them. My second favorite color story. Again, it is in the box packaging, which I don't love, but it's gonna stick around for a little bit longer. Here we have the Art Nouveau palette, which I think I'm going to declutter. I have a lot of rainbow palettes in my collection that I like more than this one, and I don't really like the shimmers in this. And there's quite a few of them, so I'm gonna let this one go as well. I'm also going to let go of the Rococo palette. This one is quite large. And even though I like the quality, I like the shadows themselves, I feel like for me the color story isn't ideal. I feel like all these colorful shades don't go with all of the neutral shimmers, and there's really only neutral shimmers in this palette except for a purple, so I feel like I'm a little stumped when I use that palette. This is their first palette, and this is what made me fall in love with the brand. This one actually ended up being my best palette of, was it 2018? Has it been that long? 19 maybe? I don't remember, but I really like this palette when I got it. I have sort of changed my makeup preferences a bit though, and I feel like this isn't as good these days as the things that I use right now, because makeup has come a long way, formulas have come a long way, and even though I really like the mattes in this, the shimmers are a bit lackluster for what I go for these days. But even though I feel that way, since this is a bit of a sentimental piece for me, even though I don't really have emotional attachment to my makeup, I'm gonna keep this just because it was the palette that made me fall in love with the brand, and I did really used to like this palette, and I do want to have a couple of memories from Kylab just because I really liked them as a brand. And yeah, I'm gonna keep them because I thought that their ideas and just the way that they ran their brand was really good. Let's talk about my Glamlight palettes, because I feel like I had more than this, but maybe I don't. I'm a little surprised by that. I feel like they've just come out with so many things recently, but maybe they haven't come out with as many things as I thought. Yeah, I did also have the Hershey Kisses ones, that's true. So let's start with these. Do I have all of them? Was this all of them? Did I declutter some? I feel like I may have decluttered some stuff last year, now that I think back. That's probably what happened. These are from the Cocktail collection, so I have 3 of them here. I have the Dirty Martini palette, which is a beautiful kind of green neutral palette. I'm definitely going to keep this. I think this is really pretty. I'm going to keep this one as well. Am I going to keep this one? No, I'm going to declutter that one. I don't need that one. I feel like I have this color story over and over, and even though it's pretty, I don't think I'm going to really end up using it, so I'm going to declutter that one, but I am going to keep this one. This one is the Chocolate Martini palette. I think this is a beautiful neutral palette that I've actually dipped into quite a bit this year, so I'm going to keep these 2. I'm also going to keep the Frosted Flakes palette, which I think is beautiful. This color story is really nice. I love the combination of the oranges to go with the blues and with the neutrals thrown in there. It just kind of works, and I think they did a really good job with this collab, and I very much enjoy that this was only one palette. I think this is what I want to see more from Glamlight, just more curated collections that aren't just a bunch of monochromatic palettes in a collection. I think they did really good with this one. The Barbie palette is one of my favorite palettes from last year, even though I'm not a Barbie fan at all, but the color story in this and the formulas in this palette absolutely makes up for the theming of it, so I'm gonna keep this one. I'm not sure what I want to do about the Cake palette. I have loved this palette for a very long time, but now that I have my Blend Bunny palettes, I think it's time for me to let go of this one. I don't need this one anymore. I think the mattes are really nice, the shimmers are really nice. It's quite a large palette. It's a little bit annoying to store. I'm gonna let this one go, just find a better home for it, because I don't think that I'll be reaching for this, and I don't really need this palette anymore. This one I think is also time to declutter. This is the Donut palette. It's just a little bit annoying to store, and even though I like the palette, I like the shadows, I don't need it. These ones I'm torn on because I don't really love the color stories of the Scooby-Doo palettes, if I'm being completely honest. I find that they're not perfect for how I like to do my makeup. I think that they lean a little too dark. I wish I had some lighter mattes and some lighter shimmers in them, and so I think I'm actually gonna declutter these 2, even though they are quite new to my collection. I just don't really see myself reaching for them again. They are really pretty, but like I said, I gotta be honest with myself, and I don't need to keep things that I know I'm not gonna use. So I think I'm gonna let these 2 go as well. The Icy collection, these are basically just monochromatic palettes. Do I need these? I have so many blues in my collection. I don't think I do. I'm gonna declutter this one, and I'm also going to declutter this one. This one is just not really my color story. Like, this is very like a one-trick pony. I feel like there's not a lot you can do with this. It's all very same. So I don't need this. I mean, except for that white in the corner, all of those shades look exactly the same. So I'm gonna let both of those go, as well as the Paint palette, I think. This one is really nice quality. If you've been looking for a nice rainbow palette, This is definitely a good contender. I think the shimmers are beautiful, but it's just, I don't really like the shape of it. It's a little bit just kind of annoying. And even though you can bend it all the way back, it's just like, it takes up a lot of I don't know what it is about it. It just annoys me. So this one is gonna go as well. I am gonna keep this one though. This is the Ice Cream Dream palette. This is a beautiful pastel palette. One of my favorites in my collection. Definitely going to keep this. I don't have a lot of pastels, so I definitely want to make sure that I have some that I really like. I'm actually surprised at how much I've been decluttering, because I feel like I'm decluttering more than I'm keeping, which that wasn't really my intention in this video, but you know, I gotta be honest, and it's nice to just free up a little bit of space. Let's move into, I have 3 palettes here from It's Belle Cosmetics, which is a brand that I really like. This is the Cool Summer palette. This might be one of my least favorites from the brand. I really enjoy the color story. I love the shimmers in this palette, but the mattes just weren't, they just weren't really up to par for me. So I think I am going to declutter this one. Even though I like it, I just don't really see myself reaching for it again because I don't really like the mattes in it. This one, however, is the first palette I tried from the brand. This ended up being my favorite palette of 2020, maybe 2021. I don't know, time flies, but this is the Break the Rules palette. I think this is absolutely stunning. This is what made me fall in love with all shimmer palettes. As you can see, it's been well used. I'm gonna keep this around because there is no reason for me to declutter it. This palette is totally fine still, and I love it. This is the Dawn of Fall palette, which I like this palette as well, but it's a little dark heavy for what I prefer. But am I gonna keep this? I'm really not gonna use it because these shimmers are just very dark, except for a couple of them, which I like, but I just don't see myself really reaching for this one over, say, something like my Sugar Drizzle palette. So I think I'm actually gonna declutter this. Here is a pile of palettes that I will not be decluttering a lot from. The only one is maybe this one on top here. This one is from Pat McGrath. It's the, what are you even called? This is the Rose Decadence palette. I don't remember when I got this or why I have this. I feel like I didn't buy this myself. I think I got this in like a subscription box or something way back in the day. I'm not sure. I think I am going to declutter this one though, because I don't really gravitate towards these kind of rosy mauvey tones. It's just not really my color thing. So this one I am going to declutter, but all of these other ones I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep, so I'll be quick about them. This is a holiday palette from this year, and even though I don't really like the shimmers in this palette, I think the mattes are very, very nice, and I want to give this a couple more goes before I decide if I want to keep it. So this one is going to stick around. Here is my only Mothership palette. I freaking adore this palette. I hate this packaging. I think it's cute, but it's so annoying, and it's like, I want to keep it because if I get another Mothership palette, I want to be able to tell them apart, and all of these look exactly the same, so I'm just going to keep it in there and be annoyed by it. But this is the Bronze Seduction palette. I think this color story is just so pretty. I might even use this palette today, because now that I look at it, I'm like, I really want to play with this again. I think it is gorgeous, so it's definitely going to stick around. These palettes are not going anywhere. These are all of my Blend Bunny palettes, which are all the palettes that they've ever come out with. I love them all so much. This is the Primal palette. I will be quick, but these are some of my favorite palettes in my collection. Blend Bunny has my absolute favorite matte formula, and their shimmers have come a long way since I first started, and I feel like they are just absolutely killing it. This is a Surge palette. Such a beautiful, beautiful color story. This has so many different unique tones that I don't see in a lot of palettes, and these are the palettes that I compare everything else to, and if Blend Bunny has it and has done it better, everything else is just gonna go because I'm just not gonna use it. Here we have the All Done Up palette, which is the newest palette that she came out with. It is beautiful. It's such a pretty, neutral, grungy palette while still being fun. I really enjoy it. This is my favorite palette. It was my favorite palette of last year. It's just a blends palette. This is the rainbow palette of all rainbow palettes. There are no duds in here. This is the palette I reach for if I ever struggle with an eyeshadow and I need something that's going to layer. I reach for this, and it's never let me down. Lastly, the Dollhouse palette, which is probably my least favorite out of the palettes. Even though I like it, I just feel like these kind of tones don't look as good on me as some of these other palettes, but I still love the formula, and I'm gonna keep all of them. We've got some more brands here. We have Menagerie and we have Ace Beauté. This is the Paletopoly palette. Love this, one of my favorite palettes of the year. Beautiful color story, beautiful formula. I'm gonna keep this one. I'm also going to keep the Tropical Vibes palette, which is such a stunning color story. I feel like this one was one of the most surprising releases of last year. I don't think anybody really saw this coming, and when it was sneak peeked, everybody went crazy for a good reason. It is beautiful. I love everything about this. I think it's time for me to let go of the Oceanic palette though, because this is the old formula from Ace Beauté, and even though I didn't really have any issues with it, it is starting to be kind of old, and I also haven't reached for it, so I think this one is gonna go. These two palettes here, I'm not sure about. This is the Flare palette. I like the color story. This is also the old formula. And even though I think it's fine, I haven't really reached for it. So I think I'm gonna let that one go as well. This palette they sent me as a bit of a welcome to our PR kind of thing. And I wouldn't have picked this out myself. This is just a rainbow palette. So even though I like the formula in it, I'm gonna let this one go as well because I have my Blend Bunny palette, say it with me. I don't need this. Next up we have the Nostalgia palette, which I like this palette, but I'm not head over heels in love with this color story. So I think I'm gonna let this one go as well. I really like the formulas on these though, but these colors just don't really make me excited to use it. So I'm gonna let that one go too. I'm surprising myself here. Let's move into some Menagerie, which is one of my favorite brands. This palette is so cute, no longer available. This one is the Courtship palette, and I love one of the shimmers in here. The shimmer here is so beautiful. But I haven't reached for this in a very long time, and I now have so many shimmers that are just better than this one at this time. So I think it might be time to start decluttering some of my Menagerie palettes because they are also getting quite old, and I have found with Menagerie's formula it doesn't hold up as well over time as some of the other brands in my collection. So I think I'm actually going to declutter this one. This was the first palette from the brand. This was when they used to be called Makeup Monsters, and it's the Dragon Child palette. This was like sort of what started my channel. It was the first review that I ever did on my channel, and I think Menagerie was one of the first brands that I started talking to behind the scenes. I love them so much as a brand. I think they're amazing, and I'm gonna keep this palette just for nostalgic reasons, but I'm never gonna use this again because it is a very, very old palette, but I can't get rid of this one because it just has a special place in my heart. This one I'm going to let go of though. This is the Violet Ink, I think this one is called. It's a cute 6-pan, but it's very monochromatic, and I feel like both of the shimmers are darker than what I prefer in my eye looks, so I don't really feel like I need to hold on to that one anymore. Here's the collab palette that I did with Menagerie. It's the Serenity palette. I love this palette so much. I'm of course going to keep it because this is my baby. We worked on this for like 2.5 years before it actually launched, because this was like during the pandemic and everything got pushed back and stuff. So I was happy that it was brought to life at all, and I think it is a beautiful palette that I am so proud of. So I'm of course going to keep it. Next up we have the original Killer Purr palette, which I'm gonna declutter this one because I have the updated version, and I will go through some of the palettes that I have yet to review at the end of the video because I have probably like 12 palettes that I'm gonna rank, and I didn't want to put those into all of these palettes because then I would kind of forget where they were after. So we're gonna go through my newest palettes at the end, but this one I'm going to declutter because now I have the updated version of it. This is a palette that has gone in and out of stock so many times. It's the Flight Club palette. It's a beautiful purple palette, and even though this color story is not something that I reach for a ton, it's still quite new to my collection, and I love the packaging, so this one's gonna stay too. I do think I'm gonna declutter the Whale Song palette. I've had this for a very long time, and even though I like it, I don't love the shimmers in this. The mattes are nice, but I have a lot of blues in my collection already, so this one is gonna go. The Feral palette, I think I'm gonna let this one go as well, even though it's such a beautiful palette, but the last time I used this, the quality of it just wasn't very good. So I'm not sure if it's just gone bad because I've had it for so long or what, but I think even though I love the packaging on it, man, the packaging is so pretty. I almost want to keep it just for the packaging. Do I want to keep this one more time? Like, what if a brand comes out with single shadows that fits into here? Maybe then I will regret not having this. I'm going to keep this just for the packaging. I have the space for it. I might as well. I'm not going to use it though, but I'll keep it for the packaging, just for the future. This is the Sugar High palette, which is a beautiful, beautiful palette. I'm gonna keep this. It's quite new to my collection, so I mean, it's not that I haven't made up my mind about it, I just don't feel like I've given it enough love, so I'm gonna keep this around for a bit longer. I'm also going to keep the Pastel Puff palette, which is such a cute pastel palette. I really like the quality of this still. I used this earlier this year and I didn't have any issues with it, even though it is getting on the older side, but I'm gonna keep this for another round. Next up, we have all of my Unsai palettes, which is a lot because I don't know if I've decluttered any of the palettes that I own from Unsai, and I have everything they've ever come out with. So I do think it's time though that I'm going to let some of these go, but we'll see as we go along. I'm for sure going to keep both of the Christmas palettes. These were some of the best palettes of last year. I love these. Too bad they were limited edition because they really did something with these. I feel like they killed it both with color story and formula, so those are absolutely going to stick around. I'm also going to keep my Hella palette, which is the collab that they did with Angelica Nyqvist. Love this palette. I think it's gorgeous. The Norns palette I think is going to be staying as well. I think this is a really pretty color story. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I really like this multi-chrome up here. I think this is so pretty. And this bottom row of shimmers, chef's kiss, so good. I'm gonna keep it. This is the Elva 2 palette. This is the only palette that they've ever come out with pressed glitters, but I think they were just trying something new and nobody really seemed to like it, so they stopped, which I'm happy about. But I'm gonna keep this one as well. I really like the pastel shades in here. I think they perform super well. This one I think I am finally going to declutter. This is the Elva palette, just the #1 palette, and I think that their formula has just come such a long way since this palette, and even though the formulas in here are nice, I feel like their newer palettes are just so much better, and this color story is just not really doing it. So I'm gonna let that one go. I do think I'm still going to hold on to my Solmona palette because I love this shade. This shade is so beautiful and I'm gonna keep it for that shade alone, honestly. And I also really like the purple shade here too. I may or may not use this again. I'll give it another round and kind of just see what happens because I do enjoy it. This one I think I'm gonna let go of. This one has been discontinued. It's the Freya palette. Pretty palette, but this was, like I said, their first palette. The quality is not as good as their quality is now, and it's also just kind of boring. I'm definitely keeping this one of my favorites from Unsai. This is the Solmona 2 palette. I think this is a wonderful color story, wonderful formulas. Got absolutely no complaints at all. Let's talk about these ones. These ones are from the Saga of Freya collection. I felt like I had another one in here somewhere too. Oh yeah, it's right here. These are so cute. I really like these palettes even though I haven't used them a whole ton, but this is the cat with the golden carriage and I think this is so cute. I mean, look at that. Very, very cute. Color story, not one that I reach for a lot, but I like the formulas in there. This is the Tears of Freya palette, also really, really cute. I enjoy these very much, so I am going to keep them. This one is probably my favorite. This is the double-sided one. This is the, what is this one called? Just Saga of Freya? Okay, so this is the first side in here. These are quite neutral, which I'm not really mad at, but the shimmers totally make up for it, and I feel like it makes them special. This one is my favorite side. I think this is so pretty. Such a cool, interesting color story while still being neutral and wearable, but also with some pops of color. So I really like those, gonna keep them around. These are the collab palettes that I was part of last year, and I'm of course going to keep all of them. This is the one that I did with the Unsai. This is the Giant Wolves palette. This is one of them. Don't worry, I have used my palettes a lot, but I just have, I think I have 3 that I kind of rotate between, and I don't know which ones I've used the most and which ones I haven't. But yeah, I love this palette so much. Obviously, it's my baby. This is the one they did with Tina. It's the Hummingbird palette. Beautiful palette. Gonna keep that one as well. And the one they did with Judy, which is the Red Dragon palette, which is also a really, really pretty palette. These are all going to be staying. Let's talk about these small ones. These I'm a little unsure of. I like them, but I just don't really use them. I'm gonna keep this one though. This is the Earth palette. It's probably one of my favorites. I really like the color story of this one. Next up we have the Mini Ocean palette, which I like this one, but I think I'm gonna get rid of it because the color story is a bit tricky to use and I just don't really find myself wanting to reach for that one. Next up, the Mini Force palette. This one is really, really pretty. I think I am going to keep, am I going to keep this one? It's pretty, but again, the mattes are kind of weird. Like there's only two of them and it's a very light blue and a brown. And the brown is kind of like orange leaning, so you can't really mix them together. I'm gonna let it go because it's just a bit of a tricky color story and I don't feel like thinking. Next up we have the Sculpt palette, which is the all shimmer palette, and even though I like this one, I have all shimmer palettes that I like a little bit more. I do think it's pretty, but I haven't found myself wanting to use it, so I think I am going to let that one go as well. This one I think I'm going to keep. This is the Mini Sky palette, and I think this is really pretty. This is one of the more sort of user-friendly ones out of the small palettes, and I can see myself actually reaching for this one, so I'm gonna keep this. And I think I'm going to keep this one as well. I think this one is really pretty. It's very unique. It's the Verdandi palette. I think I'm gonna hold on to this one for another round. I'm gonna try to move a little bit faster because I don't have more than like 2 hours to film right now, so I wanna make sure I get through this. These are my melt palettes. I think I'm going to declutter my Beetlejuice collection ones because I haven't used them since I made a video with them. And the color stories just don't really do it for me, and I'm also not the biggest. It's not that I'm not a Beetlejuice fan, I just don't really care. So I'm gonna declutter those. I am going to keep this one still. This is the Butterfly palette that they came out with last year. I think the color story is nice. I've struggled a little bit with the mattes in here, but it's good enough that I'm gonna keep it for a bit longer, and it was also quite expensive. I think I'm also going to keep my Blueprint palette. I do enjoy this color story, and I do like the formulas in here. I'm also going to keep the More Eternal collection because I have 2 of them, or both of them I should say. And I don't want to just keep one of them because that wouldn't make any sense, because then I'm kind of ruining the sculpt. So these are the palettes if you haven't seen them. I think they're really pretty. This one is crumbling a little bit, but I think it'll be fine. I'm just going to be careful with them. So I'm going to keep both of those. Next up we have my Nomad palettes, which I don't have a ton actually because I decluttered some of the ones that I had in my last declutter, and then they put me on their PR list this year, so I have some of their newer releases. This is their Santa's Village palette. I gotta be honest, I didn't like this palette. I thought the shimmers were way too subtle, way too soft. I get that they were toppers, but for me they were very hard pressed and just tough to get on the eyes at all. And it just took me a very long time to do the looks that I wanted to do. So I'm gonna declutter this one. These other ones I am going to keep because I think they're very pretty. This one is the Snow Lodge, Whistler, this is a very hard word for me to say, Whistler Snow Lodge palette. I think this is really pretty. It's a very, very wintry color story, and I like that. I think this is actually a beautiful palette, and now that I look at it, I'm like, maybe I'll use this one today. Maybe I'll use this together with the Pat McGrath palette. That could be an idea. I'm gonna keep this. I'm also going to keep this one. This is the, let's see, what are you called? The Montverde something palette. They always have like difficult names, but this is one of my favorite Nomad palettes. The quality of this is amazing. I don't have anything bad to say about it. I'm gonna keep it around. This is probably my favorite Nomad palette. I think this is gorgeous. It's the Hudson Valley palette. It's such a pretty, kind of neutral palette, but still colorful. I think this is beautiful. Here we have a couple of different brands. We have Fantasy Cosmetica, I have Shroud Cosmetics, I have my Colourpop palettes, which are honestly not that many. I do have another one in the pile of palettes that I'm kind of in the midst of reviewing that I need to rank, and then I have my Glaminatrix. So let's start with Colourpop. I have the At Foresight palette, which was a collaboration they did with Rob Beauty Christie. I think it's time for me to let this go, even though I like the palette a lot. I like Rob Beauty Christie, but I haven't used it, and I don't really see myself using it, so I'm just gonna let it go. I also have 2 of the large palettes. I have the Bare Necessities palette, and I think I'm gonna keep this for a bit longer. I do like that these are magnetic, which is great. It's a very neutral palette, but it has a lot of options, and so I'm gonna keep it for a little bit longer. This is the Stone Cold Fox palette. I'm gonna keep this one as well. I think the silver in here is stunning, and some of the other shades in here are really nice too. My Glaminatrix palettes, I'm gonna keep all of them. This is the Nocturnal palette. I think this is absolutely stunning. Glaminatrix is an Australian indie brand. If you haven't heard of them, they have amazing eyeshadows. This was their first palette. I actually helped sort of create the color story of this palette. And this is what it ended up being. It wasn't a collab or anything, but I was just talking to the owner and she showed me some pictures and stuff and we talked about it, but this is really pretty. It's the Sandra Rose palette. I think it is discontinued. The Glamorous palette is their newest palette. This is stunning, so pretty. Loved jewel tones in it, and my favorite palette from Glaminatrix, definitely this one. This is the Nearly Natural palette. I always say nearly neutral. It's natural, right? Yeah, Nearly Natural palette is such a pretty neutral palette. just everything that I need. I feel like this is my perfect neutral palette if I've ever seen one. So I'm gonna keep this one for sure. I'm also going to keep the You Beauty palette, which is just such a stunning color story. Love this one as well. I gotta be kind of careful with it though, because some of the shades in here has broken on me, so I just want to make sure that they don't break any further. Like this one is completely cracked, this one is cracked, I pushed it back in, but I need to do something about this one so it doesn't break any further. I'm gonna be careful with these. All of my palettes from Fantasy Cosmetica. It's a new brand that launched this year. They've come out with 3 palettes. This was their first one. It's the Druid palette. Love this palette so much. I think it is such a beautiful color story, and the formulas are amazing. The shimmers are really, really nice. The Sorcerer palette is also just such a stunning palette. I love the colors in here. And the Bard palette, which I also really enjoy. So I'm gonna keep all of these. Next up we have Shroud Cosmetics. I think I'm finally gonna let go of the Arcana palette. It's just a little too dark leaning for me. I don't know what it is. Every time I open this, I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I feel like it's more of a companion palette, and I don't know. I'm just never drawn to use it, even though the formulas are really nice. I just don't really care enough. Here we have the Halloween palette, which was a collaboration with Betty Jean. And I'm gonna keep this because I love her and I think she did a really good job with this palette. It's so cute, so definitely gonna keep that. I'm also going to keep, I think I might let go of the Creepy Cute palette because this is just really old by now. It's very beautiful, but I do have other pastel palettes that I do enjoy. Ow, and the freaking magnet just gets my finger stuck every time. This is the Creepy Cute 2, which I'm gonna keep. I love this one. I actually like the colors in here way more than I like the colors in the original one, so I'm gonna keep this one around. So we are now officially halfway through, which means that I'm gonna start on this side of my table now. Let's just go through. These are just random palettes or random brands that I only have 1 palette from, even though I have 2 from this brand. I'll talk about that later. This is from Flower Nose, and it's the Blackcurrant Cold Brew palette. This is one of my favorite neutral palettes in my collection. This is so stunning. Like this shimmer here in the triangle is everything. It's so wet looking, it's so shiny, and the mattes are just so, so beautiful. So I'm definitely gonna keep this. I have the Goddess palette from Alter Ego. I'm gonna declutter this. I never use it and I don't see myself really using it. Next up I have a palette from, just trying to find the name of the brand who made this. I think this is from Pastel Roses. It's a Trick or Treat palette. This is a holiday palette or Halloween palette that they did last year, I think. I haven't used this nearly enough. It's a beautiful, beautiful palette. I'm trying to smell it because some of my singles from the brand has gone bad very quickly, so it makes me a little wary to want to use this, but I think I'm gonna keep it for another round and just see if I can use it 1 or 2 more times before I am kind of ready to let go of it. It's beautiful though. Next up we have the Heather Austin collab with Adept Cosmetics. I think this palette is beautiful. I haven't used it nearly enough, but I'm definitely going to keep it and hopefully get some more use out of it. I also have a palette here from Catkin, which this color story is just not really, it's not really doing it for me, so I'm gonna declutter it, even though I love the packaging. I like the formulas in here. They're not too punchy, so I wish they were a little more pigmented, but yeah, I like it, but I don't like it enough to keep it. Next up, we have the Dragon Prism 2 palette from Enchanted Luster, which is an Australian indie brand. This is an all shimmer palette. This is getting quite old. I'm not sure if the shadows are still good in this. I think they're fine. Last time I swatched them, they were fine. So I'm gonna keep it for another round. I don't know if this is available anymore, and I know they've changed their packaging. It used to come with a sticker that was like peeling on the corner, so I just kind of ripped it off, which is why it doesn't have anything on it, but I'm gonna keep it for a bit longer. This is the palette that I got sent in PR from Wet n Wild. This is the Stitch palette. I'm gonna declutter it. It has a pressed glitter in it. I do not keep or use palettes with pressed glitters. Next up is Norvina 3 palette. No, 6. Wow, they've done 6 palettes and this is the only one that I have. People kept getting on me for not having tried this formula before, and I was like, fine, I'll try it, and here's what the palette looks like. And I was very sad to discover that this palette also has pressed glitters in it, which I was not expecting, and I hate that about it, but the formulas are really nice, so I am going to keep it. I haven't used it enough. I think I only did 3 looks with this. I don't know. This is definitely for me a companion palette. I don't really like the shimmers in here, so I only reach for it for the mattes, but they are nice, so I'm gonna keep it around for a little bit longer. My next pile here is a pile of palettes that I only have like, I think 1 palette from each brand in this pile. Let's see. Let's start with this one. This one is from Rephr Beauty, and it's their, what are you called? Can I read upside down? No, Sweet Tragedy palette. I think that the formulas in here are really, really nice, but I don't really like the packaging. I find this to be a little bit annoying, and even though I like the palette itself, I think I'm gonna let it go because I just don't really see myself wanting to use this anymore. I also have two palettes here from Standing O Cosmetics, and this is a brand that has been so sweet to me, and I really like what they stand for. They are more of a performance-based brand. I know all of the people on their team are like dancers, and they do like stage makeup and stuff like that. So this is the I think it's just called a performance palette, even though it just says their brand name on the front, but it's a pretty palette and the mattes are really nice. The shimmers don't do it for me. I think it's fine. You know, it is meant to be a palette that, you know, you can do long wearing makeup with and bold makeup, but I feel like for me, it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I see their vision, but the vision isn't my vision, if that makes sense. So I'm going to declutter it. And they also were so nice to send me their Stage Fright palette, which was their Halloween palette. And I gotta be honest, I haven't even used this on my eyes. I swatched it and I was just like, I just know I'm not going to be impressed by this palette. The mattes seem really nice. The shimmers are just very lackluster for what I prefer in my shimmer shadows. And so I didn't even feel like I needed to make a video with this to make up my mind about it. And I also didn't want to just bring negative attention to the brand for no reason, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who would love this palette, but I'm just not one of them. So I'm going to declutter it. Next up, I have my Hindash palette. This is the Monochromance. I really wanted to like this, but I feel like for a color lover, this one is just not it. I don't feel like the colorful shades are very pigmented at all, and they take way too long to build up, and I just don't have the patience for this. If you like softer looks, if you don't like building and blending and building and blending for hours to get the look that you want, you might like this palette. It does work well for the face, but I think I'm gonna let this one go just because I am never going to use this again. It was an expensive palette though, so maybe what I'll do is, in case they come out with another palette that has a color story I like, I can compare the two. So maybe I'll keep this only for like YouTube reasons. I'm probably not going to use this again because I want to use it, but I'll keep it for another round just because it was expensive and maybe I can get some of my money's worth from using it for comparisons or something. Next up here I have a palette from Rephr, and this is the Lotus palette, which I'm gonna declutter this. The color story just doesn't do it for me. I find this to be kind of boring. I don't think it's a bad palette, but I'm never going to reach for that one, so I'm gonna declutter it. Here is a palette that Monica did in collaboration with Copacetic, and I think this is so cute. It's a companion palette. It's a palette full of all shimmers. I love Monica. I'm definitely going to keep this palette around. Here, whoa, things almost fell over, but I saved them. It's fine, we're fine. So I know I said I only have one palette from each brand, but this is also from Flower Nose, and this was the first palette that I tried from them. This is the Circus palette. Does this have a name? Oh, Incredible Kingdom. Okay, so here's what the palette looks like. This is a beautiful neutral palette. I'm definitely going to keep this. I think it is very, very pretty. I really like the theming of it. I like all of the shadows in this palette. I'm going to hold on to it for now. I think it's time for me to let go of the Midas and Smoky Glow collab. Midas doesn't exist anymore as a brand. I think this is pretty. I like Smoky Glow, but I just haven't used this palette in a long time, so it's gonna have to go. I think I'm also gonna declutter this one. This one is from Black Moon Cosmetics. I was so excited about this palette when they first sneak peeked it. I was like, that is a gorgeous color story, and I love it, and I think I'm going to be head over heels in love with this palette, but I wasn't. I didn't like the formulas at all. I thought the mattes were very chalky. They were tough to blend, tough to build. I struggled to get this palette to do what I wanted to do, so I'm just going to get rid of it because I don't need that in my collection anymore. Next up we have the Witchcraft palette from Spellbound Beauty. This is from a small Etsy brand, and this palette was very inexpensive, and it is amazing. If you've been looking for those kind of wet looking, kind of creamy shimmers, get this palette. Like I said, it's from a small brand called Spellbound Beauty. It's on Etsy. Do I want to link anything? I don't really want to link anything because I'm just going to forget. So just looked them up on Etsy. It might be available still. I want to say it was like $20. If you're interested in something like that, really, really nice palette, would recommend it. Here's a palette from Terra Moons, and this is the El Barrio palette. I'm definitely going to keep this. I think this is beautiful. Haven't used it in a long time, but I'm gonna keep it around still. I'm also going to keep this one. I think it's the Twisted Cherry palette from Wicked Widow Beauty, and this is a really pretty palette. I like the color story quite a bit. I really enjoy the shimmers in this. The mattes aren't my favorites, but I feel like the shimmers kind of make up for the fact that I don't like the mattes that much. So it's also my first palette from this brand, so I'm gonna keep this around for a bit longer because I'm curious as to what they're gonna do next. This is actually the second palette that they sent me, and I don't even know if this has the name on it. Like, I forget what this palette is even called because it doesn't say on it, but this palette has pressed glitters, and I didn't know that when they offered to send me this. They just said they had a new glittery formula, but they didn't say that it was actually just pressed glitters. So I'm gonna declutter this one because I don't use palettes with pressed glitters, and also the packaging here is like kind of starting to come apart. Not sure if you can see that. So the quality is maybe not the absolute best. Like I think it's a cute idea, but I don't like these kind of double-sided thingies that some brands are trying to do. I just don't really think it works, and it's a bit just like trying too hard. Like, just make a regular palette. Next up, I have the Meet Me in the Underworld palette from Louis Cosmetics. I think this is a wonderful palette from a UK brand, I think it is. I really like this. I'm going to keep it around for a bit longer. I am going to declutter my Cutie palette from Nabla. I just don't use it. I think it's a nice palette, but like I said, I just don't use it, so it's gonna have to go. This is the palette that Samantha March did in collaboration with Rephr, so I'm gonna keep it, even though this is not the kind of colors that I like. I think mauves honestly look awful on me. But I know they're Samantha's favorites, so because I like Samantha and I do consider her my friend, I'm going to keep this around. Now, this is a very, very fun pile of palettes. I have my Natasha Denonas here, which are not that many, and I have my Unearthly. So let's just go ahead and start with some of my Natasha Denona. I also have a couple of just randoms here. This is one from Urban Decay. It's the Naked Foxy palette, and I gotta be honest, I don't hate this. The only times I reach for this palette, however, is for the mattes. So when I think that these two neutral mattes are actually quite nice, and it's a very compact, easy palette to travel with. So I've chucked this into my bag a few times when I have traveled, so I'm gonna keep it around. Never thought I would, but it's actually quite handy. And I'm also gonna keep this. This is the chocolate dahlia stack from Kaja, and they sent me this, and I think this is actually really pretty. I really like the shimmer, and I like the two mattes in here. The only thing about it is it's a bit annoying to use, but they perform so well, and I like the tones in here. I think they're really, really pretty mattes, so I'm gonna keep both of these. I also have the mini gold palette from Natasha Denona, and I love the shimmer. I think it's really pretty, but the rest of the palette isn't really something that I use. So I think I am going to, do I want to let this go? I have so many of these kind of shades. I am going to let this go, even though it is a nice palette, but I don't love all of the shades in it. So it's just going to have to go. I'm going to keep this one. This is the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona, and I really enjoy this. I think the quality is really nice. There are a couple of shades in here that I'm just not a fan of because they're more satiny, but I think overall it's a pretty color story. It's a very wearable palette. You can get a lot of very simple, quick and easy looks with it, and it just performs well. So I am going to keep this one. I'm also going to keep my Metropolis palette. I don't know how the quality is on this anymore. I've had it for quite some time now. I bought this when it first launched, so it's been 3 years maybe, but last time I used it, which was earlier this year, the cream to powders were still fine, so I'm definitely going to keep it for a bit longer. I think this is my favorite Natasha Denona palette. I love the quality of it. I love the color story. I think it's just beautiful. I also have the Sendo palette. This is the kind of mid-size range of her brand, and I think it's a nice palette. It's not a color story that I really reach for, but I do like the quality of it, so I'm gonna keep it for a bit longer, even though I don't really see myself using it very much. I'm gonna give it another year or so in my collection and just kind of see what happens. Next up, we have the Pastel palette, and I did not give this a good review. I did not think that this was great quality. I just felt like I wanted a bit more, and this is very subtle. I do understand it's supposed to be pastels, but I just wanted a little bit more oomph, and I felt like the color story was a bit weird and tough to work with, but I am going to keep it just for a little bit longer because it is quite new to my collection, and like maybe I'll get some more use out of it. I don't know, but I'm gonna give it another chance. Let's move into all of my Unearthly palettes. I have a lot of them here. I think most of these have been sent to me in PR with a few exceptions. Here we have the in the dark palette. This one is so pretty. I really like this. I haven't used all of these palettes that much. They come out with so many things that is like really hard to properly review everything, but some of these palettes I absolutely love. I'm gonna keep this one. I'm also going to keep this one, which is the Bunnies palette. I think this is so, I had such a fun time playing with this palette. I love the 3 looks that I did with it, so for sure going to keep that as one of my favorite pastel palettes in my collection. This is the Don't Be Jelly palette. I love this one as well. One of my favorite all shimmer palettes in my collection. The only one that I'm sort of considering decluttering is the Warms My Blood palette, because most of these shimmers crease like crazy on me and I'm just not really able to use them, but the mattes are really nice. So I'm gonna keep this palette for the mattes alone and hopefully get some use out of them. But I'm scared to use some of the shimmers in here that I haven't really used yet because I'm worried that they're going to crease. So yeah, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about that, but I am going to keep it because this was an expensive palette and I did buy this myself, which makes it for me a little bit harder to declutter over something that I got sent in PR. If I spent my own money on it, it's like I kind of want to get a little bit of money's worth playing with this palette, so I'm gonna keep it. Next up we have the All I Ever Wanted 2 palette. I love this, one of my favorite palettes in my collection. This is an all shimmer palette, beautiful color story, beautiful formulas, just there's nothing I don't like about this, and the same goes for the All I Ever Wanted original palette. Such a pretty palette. This is my favorite all shimmer palette in my collection. I think this is just beautiful, and I think they've been discontinued. I'm sorry, but I still love them. I also really enjoy the Vitality palette. I feel like the mattes in this palette are a little bit on the thinner side compared to some of the other mattes that they've come out with, but they still work well. They just take a little bit longer to build, but I really enjoy the shimmers in this palette more than some of the shimmers in the other palettes, so I'm definitely going to keep this one too. Another one of my favorites, this is the Leather and Lace palette. I feel like I have not given this enough love. This is also a palette that I'm tempted to use today because I do plan on doing my makeup after this because I have to go somewhere. So maybe I'll keep this like on the side and dip into this one a little bit because I want to give it a little bit more love. Next up we have this one doesn't have a name on it and I always forget what the name of this one is, but I love this palette. It's one of my favorites from the brand. I think it is just gorgeous. I mean, just look at these shimmers. So pretty. This one I also love. This one is the Witching Hour palette. This one was, I want to say, their Halloween release last year. The only kind of dud I would say is this orange down here is a little bit too hard pressed for my liking. It's kind of tough to pick up on a brush, but overall quality is nice except for that shade and you can still make it work. But I really enjoy the color story of this. I think it is quite unique and pretty. This is this called a Serendipity palette? I don't think it is. I think it was a collab with someone named that. I wish that they would have their names on all of the palettes, but this was back when they used to be called Alien Cosmetics and my memory is not that good, so I forget names of things very quickly. But I'm gonna keep this palette around for a bit longer. I will say the red down here is a bit of a dud. It's also very hard pressed and just tough to get shadow out of the pan, but I do think that they have reformulated this one now. I could be mistaken, but I hope that they have, but I'm going to keep this one for another round. The Sleepover palette, I'm going to keep this one too. I really enjoy this color story. I think this is really pretty and you can do a lot with this, even though it is sort of a monochromatic palette without being a monochromatic palette. I think they did a really good job with this one. I'm also going to keep this one, which is the Strawberry Milkshake palette. This one is so cute. I really like the color story in this one too, so gonna keep pretty much all of my Unearthly palettes. I don't think I decluttered a single one, but I really like the brand, so it makes sense. Guess what? We're not done yet. We still have 4 more piles to get through, so we're just gonna get started on this one. I have a lot of my Lethal palettes here, which are all in the middle. We'll save those for last. I'm gonna go through my Sigma palettes first. I only have 2. I have the Alice in Wonderland palette, which I'm gonna keep it. I think it's a nice palette. The shimmers are not my absolute favorites, but I think they're nice enough. I do wish that they had a little bit more just sparkle and fun to them, but it's fine. I also have the Cinderella palette, which is also really pretty. I really like this color story. This is probably my favorite color story from Sigma, and every time I've used this palette, I've just felt really pretty. So, you know, that's gonna count for something, even though the formulas maybe aren't my favorites. Here I have one palette from Shall We Makeup, and they actually sent me a package a few days ago with some other products, and they have some single multi-chromes and stuff, so I'll include those in a video coming up. But this is really, really pretty. I enjoy this quite a lot. This is the Liana palette, and I think this is still available. The formulas in here are really nice. I'm not sure if you can see that sort of multichrome in there in the mirror, but it has a very strong shift to it. It's really, really pretty. So I'm gonna keep this one. I'm also going to keep my Dose of Colors palettes. I don't use these that often. This is the Cutting Edge palette. It's a really, really pretty grungy green palette. I'm gonna keep it even though, like I said, haven't used it in a while. This is the Baked Browns palette. The only thing I would say about this is I wish it went a little bit deeper. I don't feel like it goes as deep as I was kind of hoping, but I'm gonna keep it because it goes really nicely with this one, which is the Smoky Soiree palette. I really like Dose of Colors formula. I think they're really, really nice. And like I said, these two go very nicely together. So I'm gonna keep both of them. Now let's talk about Lethal. So I have quite a few palettes here, and some of these I've kind of taken apart, and I think I rearranged some of the shadows, and I don't know the names of all of these palettes because they don't have the names on them. So I can't really tell you what they are called, but I'm gonna probably keep most of these just because they are magnetic, so I can depot these and move them around if I want to. So for that reason, I feel like every single palette out of these have at least 1 or 2 shadows that I absolutely love. Whereas there are some shadows that I just don't really care for, whether it's like formula or color, but I'm gonna keep them because, yeah, this one I've definitely messed with a little bit. I've put in some shades that aren't supposed to be in here. This was a all multichrome palette that they sent me. Like I said, I've kind of moved things around, so I can't tell you exactly what is in them, but just know that I do like a lot of the shadows from Lethal. They don't have my favorite matte formula, but their shimmers have come a very long way. This is the One Up palette. This is one of my favorite palettes from them, actually. I think this is a really nice palette. I like the color story. I like all of the mattes and the shimmers in this, so I'm definitely going to keep it. I'm also going to keep the Berlin palette, Berlin 89. This is what it looks like. I think it's very, very pretty. I'm also going to keep this one, which is the Lethal is Dead palette, which was a collaboration with Teresa from Teresa Estet. I think this is a really interesting color story, and I did take out the, wait, no, I didn't take out anything in this one. I think I took out something in the new one. This is the first collab that they did, and this is the second one that they did. Did I mess with this palette? Yeah, I took out the silver, and I put the silver into, was it this one, or I don't know, but like I said, I've kind of moved things around a bit, so they're not exactly how they're supposed to be, but I'm gonna keep it because I really enjoy it. And this little 6-pan is also one that I have kind of messed around with. I put some of the darker shimmer shades that was in the other all shimmer palette into this one, and I took the lighter shades and put it into the other one because I prefer lighter shimmer. So these are some of the darker ones that I don't really reach for, but this one is really, really pretty. Here we have another palette. Again, I don't know the names of these because I completely forgot, but I'm going to just keep all of them because I feel like I am gonna want these in my collection for quite some time. This one is really cute as well. I enjoy this color story quite a bit. I don't know why I had the sleeve on that. Oh, because the names are on the back. This is the After Dark palette, but I'm actually gonna just get rid of the sleeve because I don't care enough to keep it. And this I think was the Night Flower or something like that palette. I like this palette, but I felt like the color story to me was a little bit limiting, and I couldn't think of too many looks to do with this that didn't kind of all end up looking sort of similar. So I'm still gonna keep it because I do like the formulas, but it's not my favorite palette from Lethal. 3 more piles to go. Let's start with some of the palettes that I have from Game Beauty. This is a brand that I really, really want to love, but I just don't really like their formula. I have to be completely honest. The first palette that they came out with, did I declutter that one? I think I may have decluttered that one last year. Here's the Fantasy palette, which I don't love this color story. I'm actually gonna let this one go because I don't really like the formulas in it. I don't find the mattes to be super pigmented, and I struggle with some of their shimmers. I know some people like their shimmers a lot, but I don't think they're that good. I don't know, maybe it's just me. This is the newest palette from them. It's the Cyberpunk palette, and I said in another video that they sent me this, and I swatched it when I first got it, and I just wasn't impressed, and it didn't swatch in a way that made me want to even try it. So I haven't used this palette, and I don't see myself using this palette, so I'm gonna declutter this one as well. They have sent me a new package that should be on the way to me, so I hope that I'm gonna like those products a little bit more. Otherwise, I might just take myself off their PR list. I don't know, we'll see. I'm gonna have to feel that out. But this is probably my favorite palette from them, and it's the Victory palette. I'm gonna keep this one because I actually like this one. I think the formulas in here are really nice. I like the color story. It's sort of a subculture dupe. So I'm gonna keep this one and declutter the other two. Here we have a couple of different brands. I have What's Up Beauty, which is a brand that have only come out with 2 palettes, and they've sent me both of them, and I love them both. Like, these are both quite neutral palettes. This is the first one they came out with, and this is the Desert Monsoon palette. I have used this so many times, like a surprising amount of times for being such a neutral palette, but I reach into these mattes quite often, honestly. I really just like the combination of these two browns. I think they work so nicely together, and I just really like the tones in them. I think they look really good on me, and I love that I can use these two mattes with basically any shimmer, and it's just gonna look beautiful. And also the shimmers in this palette are wonderful, so I would highly, highly recommend. I think they sell this brand on Walmart, if I'm not mistaken, so maybe look there, or you can of course look at their website, but I think they've done a really, really good job with both of these. This is their newest palette. It's called the Geodes palette. I don't like this one as much because I wish it went a little bit deeper in the mattes. There is a kind of dark brown, but for me, I like a little bit more drama, so I do want the mattes to just go a little bit darker. But again, nothing wrong with this palette. The formulas are really, really nice, so I am going to keep it. Next up, I have some palettes from a brand here that is no longer around, which makes me really sad, and that's Dee Signature. She had some really, really good palettes, and I might even keep these even though they're not around anymore and you can't buy them. But this is the Pumpkin Spice palette. It's a quad. It is absolutely beautiful. Like, these shimmers, this one in particular, oh, it's so good. So I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna keep this one too. It's one of my favorite neutral palettes in my collection. This is called the Neutral Wonder palette, and I just feel like they did such a good job with this. Like, I love the range in the mattes. They're just very, very nicely curated, and all of these shimmers are so special. Like, they're more special than they look in a pan, and I'm gonna keep it because I really like this palette. This one I do think I'm going to declutter though, and this is the Exotic Skewer palette. I like this palette. The layout annoys me a little bit, which is the only reason why this one is getting decluttered. Man, I've been talking for too long. I can't speak anymore. But I'm gonna declutter this one because I wish it was a little bit just smaller and sleeker and not have like all this dead space. That could just be me, but it bothers me a little bit. Here's another brand that I discovered last year that I really, really, really have come to love, and I feel like they just keep getting better and better. This was it the first palette I tried from them? I think it might have been, and it's probably my least favorite palette from them. This is the Euphoric Dreams palette. I think this palette is nice. I will say the mattes in here are not my favorites. I think the shimmers are really nice, but there's something about this color story and like the mattes combined with the shimmers. I just don't love this, so I am going to declutter this one, but I'm gonna keep all of the other palettes that I have here. The next one is the Celestial Garden palette, which is a collaboration with Monica. And this is such a fun palette. It has water activated liners on the bottom. I think these are just so, so fun. I like the formulas on them. The shimmers in here are gorgeous. The mattes in here are really nice. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this. I'm also going to keep the Strange and Unusual palette, which is such a cool, interesting color story. I had so much fun with this palette, but I do feel like it's a little bit challenging and a little tricky to do cohesive looks with it, but the formulas, like I said, are so nice. The only thing is that the mattes aren't my absolute favorites, and I do feel like this red down here is definitely more of a pink, and it's just not my favorite. It's very hard pressed. It's kind of tough to build up, but other than that, I'm not sure if I can show you like any shifts in this. It's probably just not the best lighting for this, but just trust me when I say this is a really, really, really fun palette. And this one, which is one of my favorite palettes in my collection right now, it's the Angels of Illumination 3. This is an all shimmer palette. Can you tell I like all shimmer palettes? And I like this because it goes very light, and I just prefer light to mid-tone shimmers. It's just a preference thing. So I love this palette. I think it is beautiful. They wear so well on me. The colors just look so good. So I'm going to keep this. We have 2 more piles to go through, and I think I'm gonna start with, let me just kind of show you what we got left. And I also do have that little box of palettes. Sorry, I keep hitting the camera. But I also have these, which are the palettes that I'm sort of in the midst of ranking. So we'll go through those last because I have some fun ones in there. But let's start with, I guess, I need to move these out of the way. We're gonna start with these. This one is a palette from ZZ that I bought myself after trying this palette. They sent me this palette in PR, and this is the collaboration that they did with the English Museum, and I was blown away by the formula in this. Like, these shimmers on the sides are so unassuming in the pan, but they look so good on the eye. So I'm gonna keep this, even though it has a pressed glitter in it, even though I haven't used it more than like 2 or 3 times. I think this is just really, really fun, and I like the packaging on it, so I'm gonna keep it. But that palette was the reason I bought this one. I haven't used this one yet. This is what happens when I buy like older palettes from brands that I don't feel like I need to rush to review. I buy them and then I'm just like, well, I gotta prioritize all the new stuff that comes into my collection, and then I just never get around to playing with like the stuff that I buy. So it's a beautiful palette. I would like to try it, so I'm gonna keep it around for a bit longer because I bought it because I wanted to use it. I think this one is just called the Fireworks palette, but look at the packaging though, it's just so pretty. Here are some palettes that I'm torn on, and this is a palette from Give Me Glow. It's the Bad Witch Club palette, and I keep saying that I want to use this more, but every time I look at it, the color story just doesn't really draw me in. I don't know what it is about it. I feel like the shimmers are too dark for what I go for, so it's not a standalone palette for me. And so that just makes me not want to use it. So I'm actually going to declutter it because I've only used it once and I say I want to use it, but then I never do. So obviously I just don't care enough. I have 2 palettes from Sydney Grace. I have the collaboration that they did with Tina earlier this year. I'm going to keep it. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful palette that I want to use more. And I'm also going to, of course, keep the collaboration that they did with Mel Thompson, which is the Tiny Marvels palette. I've actually taken this out recently and used it a little bit, and it's a really, really good palette. And I feel like I didn't understand this palette as much when it first came out because this wasn't really my makeup aesthetic. But now that I've been more into these kind of tones, like, I have so much more appreciation for the color story than I used to have, and I think it's a really, really pretty palette, so I am going to keep it. Next, we have the Pastel Dreams palette from Give Me Glow, and this is a really pretty pastel palette. I'm gonna keep this because I don't have that many pastels in my collection, and I do think these are really nice, so this one is going to stick around. Here I have 3 palettes from Shine by SD, and I think I'm gonna definitely keep these. These are also collaboration palettes they did with Monica and with Bizarre Volta. I always forget her name, but they did these together, and these are all shimmer palettes. They are beautiful palettes. Absolutely gonna keep these. I think that they are stunning. And I think I'm also going to keep this one for another round. This is one of the pop-up palettes, and it's an all iridescent palette. I don't know how much I'm gonna use this. Actually, I'm gonna declutter it. Am I gonna declutter it? This is so hard because I have my Noctilucent palette from Blend Bunny, which is their highlighting palette. That is basically the same thing. It's a lot sleeker and it's more of a highlighting formula, whereas I feel like these are more of a eyeshadow formula. And with a highlighting formula, I can kind of multi-use it, and I don't feel like I can use some of these as highlighters because they're a little chunky. So I'm actually gonna let this one go, which makes me sad. It's a really nice palette and I like the formulas, but I just don't use it because I have something I like more. These 2 palettes, I go back and forth on these every time I do a declutter, but this is the Vintage Rose palette from Give Me Glow. I really like this palette, but I just don't ever use it. So I think I'm going to declutter it, and I think I'm also going to declutter the Vintage Rose palette. For me, it's more of a color story thing, so I never reach for it. I feel like I have these colors over and over and over, and I feel like at least 5 brands are gonna come out with a Valentine's Day release that is going to look exactly like this this year. So I'm going to go ahead and let this one go as well. Last pile before we get into the palettes that I'm currently sort of testing out or I'm ready to rank. We have all of my Sugar Drizzle palette, which is one of my favorite brand. This is the Trick Roar Treat palette, which is so cute with a little dinosaur riding on the moon. It's just adorable. I'm going to keep this. I think it is really, really fun. I love the color story in this. I like the formulas in this very, very much. This is the Pickle palette that was my first palette from the brand, I'm pretty sure, and it kind of made me fall in love, and I think this is just adorable, so I'm gonna keep this one as well. The next palette here is their Hypernova palette, which was a palette that they came out with for the holidays this year, but I was actually sent this palette a few months early because she wanted my opinion on the formulas on this palette, and I honestly didn't like it because she tried a different manufacturer for this, and so the formula is not the same as her other palettes, and I was pretty open about not liking this, and so I didn't really review it because I wasn't the biggest fan and I didn't feel like making a video with it. So that's why you haven't seen this on my channel, because I just wasn't really that impressed, and she did end up selling these for I think like half the price or something like that compared to her normal palettes, because she kind of agreed that this palette wasn't up to par. So yeah, I don't know if it's still available. I don't know if she's going to keep these in stock, but this is not a palette that I would recommend from the brand, so I'm actually going to declutter this one. This is one of my favorite palettes from the brand. This is the Sugar Dreams palette. It is a beautiful all shimmer palette with mostly light shimmers, which you guys know I love by now, so I'm gonna keep this one. I'm also going to keep the MILF palette, which is the Man I Love Frogs. I think this is just adorable. My only complaint is that there's been a lot of oil seepage, which I'm sure you can tell, like there is oil basically all over the palette, and some of these shades were just a little bit too emollient and it's kind of like come out of the pan, and it just looks kind of gross. But I like this palette. I like the shadows themselves. I don't have any issues with them. It's not like they've gone bad or anything. It's just there's too much binder in the shadows and it's made it so that it's kind of gone all over the place. But I'm gonna keep it because I do think the palette is nice. This one, I forgot the name of this one. It's a Warrior palette, the Firefly palette. Is that what this even is? I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. Here's what the palette looks like. I'm gonna keep it. I think it's really pretty. This one I'm also going to keep. This is the Mattes palette, and she made this because she felt like she wanted a palette that was matte heavy that would go with all of the shimmer palettes, and I totally understand that. I do feel like it could have been edited down a little bit, but the matte formula in this is spectacular. I really hope that she keeps this matte formula and starts putting these mattes into her all shimmer palettes and like starts making fun color stories with this formula, because it is so good. It's one of the best mattes, purple mattes even, that I've ever tried. So I'm absolutely going to keep this. I think it is beautiful. I'm also going to keep the Meant to Be palette. Also super, super cute. I really like these 6 pans. I think they're adorable. The Frosty Flamingo palette is a beautiful palette that I'm also going to keep. It's a little too monochromatic for what I prefer, but I love the shimmers in here so much that I don't even care. I'm also going to keep this one, which is the Butterfly palette. The names are never really on the front of these, and so I forget what they're called, but this one is also beautiful. The mattes in this palette are not as good as the mattes in the Mattes palette because they're different manufacturers. Like I said, she keeps trying to like find the perfect formulas, so it's a little bit of trial and error. This one doesn't have my favorites, but they're totally usable and totally fine, and the shimmers are beautiful. Okay, let's just go through the palettes that I haven't shown yet. So these are new to me palettes in my collection that I definitely have thoughts on, but I will not be decluttering any of these because I do need to rank them still. The first one here is a small tiny little palette also from Sugar Drizzle, and this is a all hollow palette. These holographic eyeshadows are insanely beautiful and I can't stop using them. They're so pretty, they wear so well, they're so interesting and unique. And I would highly recommend it if you are looking for holographic eyeshadows because there are not that many of them on the market, and these are really nice. So next up we have an Unearthly palette. This is the Dead of Night palette. I really like this color story. I'm gonna keep it. Yeah, I don't really have a ton of thoughts on this yet. I have used it once or twice, I think. See, I even forget the looks that I did with it, but I do enjoy it. It came out at the same time as the Daily Grind palette, which I like this, but I don't really love the formulas in these palettes, and the color story is a bit weird, so not sure how long this one is going to stick around, but I did do one of my favorite looks that I've ever done with that palette somehow, so maybe there was something to it still. 2 palettes here from Ace Beauté. This is the Envy palette. Beautiful, beautiful color story. One of my favorite palettes that Ace Beauté has ever done. I'm definitely going to hold on to that one for a while. I'm going to hold on to all of these, but you know what I mean. This is the Aura palette. I like this one more than I thought I would. I think this is really pretty as well. This one is from Lethal, another one that does not have a name on it, so I forgot what this one was called already. but this one is really pretty. One of my favorite color stories that I've gotten from Lethal. Two more palettes here from Menagerie. We have the Paws and the Claws palettes. These are not actually my favorite palettes from the brand. I felt like the formulas were a bit subpar from what I'm used to from Menagerie. I didn't love the mattes as much as I thought, and the shimmers were nice, but I don't know. I just didn't fall in love with these palettes, which makes me sad because they're so cute. Like, it's a kitty and a puppy. I wish I liked them more, but I just don't love them. I also have the Pretty Please palette from ColourPop. They did send me this in PR, which was exciting because it was the first time they've ever sent me anything that's like relevant, that's new. So I was excited to play with it. I like the looks that I did with it. I like the inclusions of the Super Shock shadows in here, even though color story wise, a bit boring for what I prefer. Probably won't reach for it again, but it was fun to play with it. This is the updated version of the Killer Purr palette from Menagerie. This one I love so much more. I think this one is beautiful. Such a pretty color story, and I'm so happy that they decided to revamp this and make it a little bit more exciting. This palette is the Nimia palette from Naked Tutorials. This is such a good underrated palette. I have not seen anybody review this, but this is fantastic quality. So good. I'm so happy I picked this one up, and I'm surprised at how much I love it. Another palette here from Sugar Drizzle, an all shimmer palette. I love this. This one is the Trash palette. It's, I mean, look at the front. So cute. Like I said, all shimmer palettes, beautiful. I've used this quite a lot. I brought this traveling, and I love the looks that I did with it. So very happy to have it in my collection. The last palette here is from ColourPop, and it's the Aurora Struck palette. I did not have a good time with this. I gotta be completely honest. I struggled with the blues. I struggled with the shimmers. I struggled with pretty much everything about this palette. So I will probably declutter this at some point, but I'm gonna keep it because I still haven't done like my ranking my last 10-15 palettes yet, so I'm gonna keep it for that purpose, but just know that I wouldn't recommend it. So that's gonna be it for the declutter. I'm not gonna be counting. Listen, I'm too lazy. It's too much. The whole point of this was not to get an exact number of how many I decluttered. I wasn't even planning on decluttering as much as I did, but I'm happy to have gotten a lot of palettes out of my collection, and I decluttered a lot more than I thought I would, so I'm happy with that. Numbers don't matter to me. The only thing that matters is that my collection makes me happy, and I feel like I'm at a point right now where it does. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to see some other declutter videos, I will put my playlist up on the screen, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!